A $2 liquid is quietly adding hundreds of thousands of miles to engines that mechanics already wrote off as worn out. That's not a claim. That's a proven truth that repair shops are actively working to suppress. Today I'm exposing the Japanese $2 liquid secret that makes engines last 500,000 miles, what it does, what it replaces, and what happens to your engine the moment you start using it consistently. Some alternatives are useless. Some cause irreversible internal damage. This one costs $2, applies in minutes, and has mechanics genuinely lobbying for it to stay banned. Let's get into it. Secret 10, the 30-second thermal protocol. The fastest way to destroy an internal combustion engine is to start it incorrectly in the morning. Dealerships and outdated mechanic folklore tell you to walk out to your driveway, start your car, and let it idle for 10 to 15 minutes to warm up before you drive away. They claim you need to get the engine hot before putting it under load. This advice is wrong, and it is silently destroying your engine block. When your vehicle sits overnight, all the engine oil drains out of the cylinder head and drips down into the deep oil pan at the bottom of the motor. When you turn the key in the morning, the top half of your engine, including the camshafts and valve lifters, is starved of lubrication for a few seconds. If you let the engine sit and idle in the cold driveway, the mechanical oil pump spins slowly. It takes a long time for the thick, cold oil to travel up to the top of the engine. Furthermore, cold engines run rich. The computer intentionally dumps excess liquid gasoline into the cylinders to keep the cold engine from stalling. Because the engine is idling, it is not generating enough heat to burn that excess fuel. The liquid gasoline washes the thin layer of protective oil off the cylinder walls, creating metal-on-metal friction. Japanese taxi fleets follow a strict 30-second rule. You get in the car, you turn the key, you wait 30 seconds. That is the precise amount of time it takes for the oil pump to pressurize the system and push fluid to the highest camshaft bearings. Once 30 seconds have passed, you put the vehicle in gear and drive away gently. Driving the vehicle places a light mechanical load on the engine, which generates combustion heat faster than sitting at idle. The engine reaches its optimal operating temperature in minutes instead of tens of minutes. The fuel enrichment turns off quickly, the oil thins out and flows efficiently, and the engine avoids hours of cold metal wear over its lifetime. We will talk about preserving your piston soon, but first, we need to address the most expensive fluid exchange the dealership will try to sell you. Secret 9, the transmission. Fluid dilution method. If your engine is the heart of your vehicle, the automatic transmission is the central nervous system. It is a complex labyrinth of hydraulic channels, paper friction clutches, and electronic solenoids. When you bring your vehicle in for a 60,000-mile service, the service advisor will push a $300 transmission flush. They will hook your car up to a machine that uses high pressure to force all the old fluid out and replace it with new fluid. Do not let them hook that machine up to your car. A high-pressure transmission flush is a destructive service. As an automatic transmission ages, the internal clutch packs shed microscopic layers of friction material. This dark friction material becomes suspended in the automatic transmission fluid. If your transmission has high mileage, that suspended friction material is the only thing providing enough grip for the internal gears to shift without slipping. When a dealership uses a high-pressure machine, they blast that suspended friction material out of the system. Worse, the high pressure frequently dislodges chunks of hardened sludge from the corners of the transmission pan and forces them into the delicate passages of the hydraulic valve body. Thousands of drivers have paid for a flush, only to find their transmission slipping, shuddering, and failing within 1 week of leaving the dealership lot. The Japanese fleet protocol forbids transmission flushing. Instead, they perform a simple gravity drain and fill. You pull the drain plug on the bottom of the transmission pan, just like an oil change. Only roughly 1/3 of the total fluid volume will drain out. The rest stays hidden inside the torque converter. You measure how much old fluid drained out, and you pour that same amount of fresh fluid back into the top. You are not shocking the system. You are not removing all the friction material. You are diluting the old, degraded fluid with a dose of new chemical additives and fresh lubrication. You perform this dilution method every 30,000 miles, and the transmission will easily outlast the chassis of the vehicle. If that trick saved your transmission, hit that like button so the algorithm pushes this video to other drivers. We are moving back to the engine now, and we need to discuss a $10 plastic piece that causes $2,000 oil leaks. Secret 8, the positive crankcase ventilation trap. Every time a spark plug fires and an explosion pushes a piston down, a small amount of pressurized exhaust gas slips past the piston rings. This hot gas ends up in the lower crankcase of the engine block. Engineers call this blow-by gas. If this pressurized gas is not removed, the pressure inside the engine block will build up until it finds the weakest point of escape. That weak point is usually your rear main engine seal or your valve cover gaskets. When those rubber seals blow out, your engine begins leaking oil all over your driveway, requiring a large engine out repair bill. To To prevent this, engineers invented the positive crankcase ventilation valve. It is a cheap plastic valve shoved into the top of your engine valve cover, connected to a rubber vacuum hose. It uses engine vacuum to suck those blow-by gases out of the crankcase and route them back into the intake manifold to be burned. It is the most important pressure relief system on your vehicle, and yet nobody replaces it. Because it constantly filters hot oil vapor and exhaust soot, the metal spring inside the plastic valve eventually becomes choked with hard black sludge. The valve sticks shut, the pressure builds, the seals blow out, the engine dies. Dealerships rarely check this valve during routine inspections because it does not generate a high profit margin. Professional fleet mechanics treat this plastic valve carefully. They pull it out of the engine every 50,000 miles. They shake it next to their ear. If they hear the internal metal check valve rattling freely, it is clean. If it is silent, it is jammed with sludge. They throw it in the trash and spend $10 on a new factory valve, saving the engine from internal pressure. But pressure is not the only invisible force destroying your engine block. We are about to expose a chemical reaction happening inside your radiator right now that is eating your aluminum engine from the inside out. Secret 7. The coolant electrolysis test. Your engine gets hot, and it relies on a flow of liquid coolant rushing through the aluminum engine block and the radiator to keep it from melting down. When you buy a brand new vehicle, that colored antifreeze is chemically balanced. It contains anti-corrosion additives that protect the internal water pump and the aluminum cylinder head. But as the years go by, the constant heat cycles break down those chemical additives. The coolant eventually becomes acidic. When you combine acidic fluid with the dissimilar metals found in an engine block like cast iron, aluminum, and copper, you create a chemical battery. A low-voltage electrical current actually begins flowing through the liquid coolant itself. This process is called galvanic corrosion, or electrolysis. The electricity attacks the softest metal in the system, which is usually the aluminum engine block or the heater core behind your dashboard. The coolant begins to dissolve the engine from the inside out, eating away the metal until your head gasket blows or your water pump shatters. Dealerships will test your coolant with a paper strip to see if the freezing point is still good, but they rarely check for electrical current. You can perform the Japanese fleet test in your driveway using a $20 digital multimeter. You set the multimeter to read direct current voltage. You open the hood of the cold vehicle. You place the black negative probe of the multimeter onto the negative terminal of the car battery. You take the red positive probe, pop the cap off the radiator, and submerge the metal tip into the liquid coolant. If the screen on the multimeter reads 0.1 or 0.2 volts, your coolant is safe and stable. But if that screen jumps up to 0.3, 0.4, or half a volt, your engine is in danger. Your coolant has become a conductive battery acid, and it is actively dissolving your engine block as you watch. You must flush the cooling system with distilled water and refill it with fresh factory coolant to stop the electrical reaction. Keep your multimeter handy because we will need it for another electrical trick soon. But first, let us talk about a habit you have every time you look at your gas gauge. Secret 6. The submerged fuel pump preservation. We all know someone who refuses to go to the gas station until the yellow low fuel light is blazing on the dashboard. They drive their car on fumes, coasting into the gas station with the needle below the empty line. They think they are saving time by taking fewer trips to the pump. In reality, they are destroying one of the most expensive electrical components on the vehicle. Deep inside your dark gasoline tank sits the electric fuel pump. This pump spins at high revolutions per minute, sucking liquid fuel through a filter and pushing it at high pressure up to the engine block. Because it is an electric motor working under load, it generates a large amount of physical heat. Automotive engineers did not install a cooling fan on the fuel pump. Instead, they engineered the pump to rely on the surrounding liquid gasoline acting as a thermal heat sink. When your gas tank is full, the pump is submerged in cold liquid gasoline. The fuel pulls the heat away from the motor, keeping the internal copper windings cool and safe. When you drive your car down to the empty line, the pump becomes exposed to the open air inside the empty tank. It loses its liquid cooling jacket. The internal temperatures rise. The copper windings begin to cook. The microscopic bearings begin to warp from the heat. If you do this consistently, the pump will eventually seize up and die while you're driving down the highway at 70 miles per hour. Your engine will shut off, and you will lose your power, steering, and power brakes. Replacing an in-tank fuel pump requires a mechanic to drop the gas tank out of the bottom of the car, resulting in a labor bill over $1,000. The fleet management rule is simple. Half a tank is the new empty. By keeping the tank above the halfway mark, the pump remains safely submerged in liquid coolant for its operating life, ensuring it surpasses 300,000 miles without a failure. We are halfway through the list and we are moving back to the engine bay. If you want your engine to last 500,000 miles, hit that subscribe button. We are about to cover a secret that unlocks horsepower for the cost of a piece of sandpaper. Secret 5. The ground wire. Voltage drop. Modern engines are no longer purely mechanical machines. They are sensitive computer networks. Every sensor, fuel injector, and spark plug relies on clean, uninterrupted electrical voltage to function correctly. Electricity must complete a circuit. It flows from the positive battery terminal through the engine components and must return to the negative battery terminal. The engine block itself acts as the return path for all this electricity. To bridge the gap between the vibrating engine block and the chassis of the car, manufacturers bolt a braided metal ground strap from the engine to the painted metal frame. Over 5 or 10 years, road salt, moisture, and engine heat cause the metal contacts of that ground strap to oxidize and rust. The connection becomes corroded. This corrosion creates electrical resistance. Suddenly, the electricity struggles to return to the battery. To compensate for this restriction, the alternator has to work harder to push voltage through the engine. The engine computer starts receiving weak, delayed signals from the oxygen sensors and the throttle body. The spark plugs begin firing with a weaker arc. Your engine horsepower drops, your fuel economy suffers, and your transmission might start shifting harshly because the solenoids are starved of voltage. Dealerships will charge you hours of diagnostic time trying to chase down these electrical gremlins, often replacing perfectly good sensors. The professional trick is to locate the main engine ground strap. You take a socket wrench and unbolt the strap from the vehicle chassis. You take a piece of sandpaper and scrub the metal ring terminal and the frame of the car until you see shiny, bare metal. You bolt the strap back down, creating a zero-resistance electrical connection. The voltage flows properly again. The sensors read accurately. The spark plugs fire effectively. You restored lost horsepower and saved your alternator from burning itself out, all for free. Speaking of sensors, our next trick deals with a delicate piece of electronics on your car. It measures the air your engine breathes, and it is currently suffocating. Secret 4. The mass airflow. Isopropyl. Clean. Right behind your engine air filter sits a plastic tube with an electrical connector plugged into it. This is the mass airflow sensor. Deep inside that plastic tube is a platinum wire. As the engine sucks in outside air, the computer heats that wire up to hundreds of degrees. As the incoming air rushes past the hot wire, it cools the wire down. The computer measures how much electrical current is required to keep the wire hot and uses that math to determine the volume and density of the air entering the engine. It uses this data to calculate how much liquid fuel to spray into the cylinders. Over tens of thousands of miles, particles of road dust, smog, and oil vapor slip past your air filter and crash into that hot platinum wire. The dust bakes onto the wire, creating an insulating crust of burnt carbon. Because the wire is wearing a jacket of insulation, the incoming air cannot cool it down properly. The computer looks at the data and assumes very little air is entering the engine. It responds by cutting the fuel supply. Your engine begins running lean. A lean engine runs hot. The combustion temperatures can warp your cylinder head or burn a physical hole through your exhaust valves. Dealerships charge $300 to replace the sensor. You do not need a new sensor. You need $2 of chemistry. You unbolt the sensor from the intake tube. You take a bottle of pure isopropyl alcohol, at least 91% purity, or a dedicated aerosol mass airflow cleaner. You spray the liquid onto the platinum wire, washing away the baked-on crust. You never touch the wire with a brush or a rag, because it will snap. You let the alcohol evaporate into the air for 10 minutes. You reinstall the clean sensor. The computer receives accurate data. The air-fuel ratio is restored to factory specifications, and the engine temperatures drop back to safe levels, but cleaning the sensor only works if the air can make it past the next bottleneck. Secret 3. The throttle. Body carbon ring. If the mass airflow sensor is the nose of the engine, the throttle body is the throat. It is an aluminum housing with a pivoting metal blade inside. When you press your foot on the gas pedal, that metal blade swings open, allowing a rush of air into the intake manifold. When you take your foot off the gas and sit at a red light, that metal blade snaps closed. It leaves a small gap around the edge of the blade. That gap is the only way the engine can pull in enough idle air to keep from stalling. Because the positive crankcase ventilation system routes hot, oily exhaust vapor into the intake manifold, that vapor crashes against the back of the cold throttle blade. Over years of driving, the oily vapor hardens into a black ring of carbon around the edge of the metal blade. This carbon ring chokes off that idle air gap. Your car will start idling roughly. The steering wheel will vibrate at stoplights. The engine might stall out when you turn on the air conditioning compressor. Dealerships will quote you hundreds of dollars to perform an idle relearn procedure or replace the throttle assembly. The Japanese mechanical solution takes 5 minutes. You remove the rubber intake hose to expose the metal throttle blade. You take a clean microfiber rag and soak it with aerosol carburetor cleaner or solvent. You push the metal blade open with your fingers. You scrub the black carbon ring off the inside of the aluminum housing and the edge of the blade until the metal shines brightly. You wipe out all the residue. When you start the car, the engine can breathe freely at a red light. The idle becomes silent and smooth, exactly like the day it rolled off the assembly line. We are approaching the finale. The final 2 tricks are the heavy hitters of engine longevity. Hit that like button and let us talk about the metal flakes floating inside your engine block right now. Secret 2, the magnetic filtration upgrade. No matter how well you maintain your vehicle, the reality of an internal combustion engine is that metal rubs against metal. Your piston rings scrape up and down the cylinder walls thousands of times a minute. Your camshaft lobes smash down on the valve lifters. This constant friction results in wear metals. Tiny shards of hardened iron and steel are shaved off the internal components and swept away into the oil stream. Your engine oil filter is designed to catch this debris. But factory oil filters use pleated paper media. While the paper is good at catching large chunks of carbon and dirt, it fails to capture the microscopic metal dust floating in the oil. This metallic dust passes through the paper filter and circulates through your engine. It acts like liquid sandpaper. It gets shoved into the tight clearances of your engine bearings, scratching and scoring the soft babbitt metal until the bearing spins and the engine breaks down. High-end engine builders refuse to rely on paper alone. They utilize the power of rare earth magnets. You have 2 choices to implement this fleet trick. The first is replacing your standard oil drain plug with a magnetic drain plug. The neodymium magnet hangs down into the flow of the hot oil at the bottom of the oil pan. As the metallic dust floats by, the magnetic field rips the iron particles out of the oil suspension and locks them against the plug. When you perform your next oil change, you wipe the gray metallic sludge off the magnet and throw it in the trash. The second option is purchasing a heavy-duty curved magnet and attaching it onto the outside metal casing of your spin-on oil filter. It locks the metal shards against the inside wall of the filter canister, keeping them permanently out of the oil stream. It is a cheap, effective insurance policy in automotive engineering. And now, we arrive at the pinnacle of our list, the liquid secret that rescues engines from the junkyard and restores factory compression for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. Secret 1, the $2 piston ring. Soak. When an engine reaches 100,000 miles, a common symptom begins to appear. You check your oil dipstick and you notice the oil level is low. You are burning a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. The exhaust pipe starts puffing blue smoke when you accelerate away from a stop sign. You take the car to the dealership, they run a compression test, and they deliver the news. They tell you the engine has lost compression. They tell you the piston rings are worn out. They quote you $4,000 for an engine rebuild. They are lying to you 90% of the time. The piston rings are rarely physically worn down to nothing. Every piston has 3 rings. The top 2 rings hold the combustion pressure. The bottom ring is the oil control ring. The oil control ring is full of tiny holes designed to wipe excess oil off the cylinder wall and drain it back into the engine. Because modern engines run hot to meet emission standards, the engine oil sitting inside those holes boils and bakes into carbon glue. The carbon glue locks the piston rings flat against the piston. Because the rings are glued shut, they can no longer spring outward to seal against the cylinder wall. The compression escapes and the oil floods the combustion chamber and burns. The Japanese fleet mechanics do not tear the engine apart. They use a liquid chemistry trick to dissolve the glue. They pull the spark plugs out of the engine. They take a bottle of automatic transmission fluid. Automatic transmission fluid is unlike motor oil. It is a thin hydraulic fluid packed with industrial detergents. They pour exactly 2 ounces of the red automatic transmission fluid down each empty spark plug hole, right on top of the pistons. They thread the spark plugs back in slightly to prevent evaporation, and they close the hood. They walk away and let the engine soak undisturbed for 24 hours. During the night, that thin fluid seeps down past the piston and crashes directly into the glued piston rings. The detergents attack the baked-on carbon glue, breaking the molecular bonds and softening the sludge. The next day, they pull the spark plugs out. They place a heavy rag over the engine block and crank the starter for 5 seconds. The pistons fly up and down, ejecting the remaining fluid out of the spark plug holes and into the rag. They put the spark plugs back in and start the engine. A cloud of thick white smoke billows out of the exhaust pipe for 10 minutes as the dissolved carbon burns away. When the smoke clears, the outcome becomes apparent. Because the carbon glue is gone, the piston rings spring back open. They press tightly against the cylinder walls once again. The engine regains flawless factory compression. The oil burning stops entirely. The lost horsepower returns. A $4,000 rebuild was avoided using $2 of transmission fluid per cylinder. This piston ring soak is the guarded secret of the high-mileage automotive world. It rescues condemned engines and keeps vehicles on the road for 500,000 miles. Dealerships want you to believe that cars are disposable appliances. They want you to fear the check engine light and unquestioningly hand over your credit card. But as we have proven today, whether you are sanding your ground wires, cleaning your mass airflow sensor, or pouring transmission fluid into your cylinders, the real power lies in understanding the physics and chemistry of your machine. Which of these 10 secrets surprised you the most? Are you going to start waiting 30 seconds in the morning, or are you going to try the overnight piston soak? Drop a comment below and tell me exactly what year, make, and model you drive. I am looking for a specific high-mileage car to feature in our next restoration teardown. If this deep dive saved you a trip to the mechanic, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And guess what? It's coming up on your screen right now. Click it and I'll meet you there.